So welcome to the inaugural Master of Wine debate here at United Cellars. Tonight we'll be focusing on the age-old question, who makes better wines, Old World or New World? Just before that, we do that and I introduce the Masters here. I'll just introduce the team at UC helping to host this evening. Of course, we've got Jane Moore, our head of events. Good evening, Jane.
Everyone.
So student of the Master of Wine program and of course our head wine buyer, Mark Faber.
Evening all.
And of course myself, one of the senior wine brokers here. So I should mention before we do our introductions of the experts, if you are new to the tastings, every week we run a little quiz. It's called the Wheel of Wine, basically between each wine bracket. Mark, if we can just move us on there one, please. Thank you very much. Between each wine bracket, we'll be asking you a quiz question. All we need you to do is text to that number on the screen your name, email, and your answer. And it's your chance to win a $50 wine credit. So good luck with that. It's all to play for. If you get the correct answer, you get 3 entries. Incorrect answer gets you 1 entry. So good luck with all of that. So I would ask you to start pouring whilst I do my introduction to our very special guests this evening. Whilst I was doing a bit of kind of research and preparing myself for the event tonight, I read that more people have been sent to space than have their Master of Wine badge. So to have 2 of the masters here tonight is pretty special, I'm sure you'd agree. So in the corner of the New World, we have Andrea Pritka. Andrea is the founder of Wine Intuition, a wine education and corporate events business here in Sydney. She also works as an independent wine consultant, wine judge, writer, and public speaker. Born and raised in Toronto, she's now based here in Sydney, and her career in wine has been pretty diverse and has spanned from wholesale, retail, auction, digital marketing, and buying. She became a Master of Wine in 2015 and currently is the coordinator of the Master of Wine education program here in Australasia. So Mark, you've got to be, putting an apple on her desk and doing all of that sort of stuff.
Well, she is my mentor, so I absolutely do have to be doing that.
So I asked Andrea at the start of the week if she was marooned on a desert island, what would her go-to wine be? And she said it would be a Mosel Riesling, paired with some freshly baked sourdough bread and some nice cheeses, to a soundtrack of Leonard Cohen or ABBA, depending in what mood she's in. So that sounds like a great combination to me, Andrea, and welcome to the tasting.
Thanks very much, Luke.
Lots of the regulars would already know Alistair, but I'm going to give you a good introduction anyway. Alistair, he's going to be arguing for the Old World here. Alistair is an independent wine writer, judge, consultant, educator, and has been in the wine industry for 20, 30 years. He writes for Jancis Robinson as a regular contributor to Decanter and Spectator, to name a few. He studied modern languages at university and moved to Chile and then Argentina, where he lived for 4 years, and then came back to the UK in 2006, where he ventured into pretty much all aspects of the wine business until getting his Master of Wine badge in 2017. Now, asking Ali the same question, he lists his desert island wine as a classic Côte Rôtie or Old Bordeaux, paired with some roast lamb and listening to the dulcet tones of Joni Mitchell. So welcome, Ali.
Morning, everyone. Evening, morning. And yeah, looking forward to this very much. But thanks for the rather majestic introduction, Luke.
Well, I try.
Very well.
So just before we kick off, obviously this is a debate. So a couple of things to kind of go over to get you thinking. Basically, we want you to be thinking about who's put forward the most compelling argument, and a couple of criteria that we kind of thought about in how to frame that thought process. Obviously, most people attending will have had some experience with old and new world wines, and you might already have your favorites. So this evening, focus on the wines. Which wines did you enjoy the most? Whose argument did you find most compelling? And if, for example, Friday evening you were to walk into a bottle shop, or better yet, get a call from a United Cellars broker, which world, old or new, would you be most excited to explore? So have that in the back of your head whilst we're tasting these wines. Now, in terms of structure, each MW will have about 10 minutes to pitch, with about 5 minutes further for question and answers. If you guys go over, I've got the boxing bell. So I'll be ringing that if you start dragging on a little bit. I always say questions, comments, tasting notes are always welcome. You've got the chat box you can use. Feel free to unmute at any time. And one of the UC staff or the MWs will certainly take your question. But that's enough for me. I'm sure everybody's itching to get into wine number one. So I'm going to hand over to Ali and we're going to have a look at the Chablis.
Thanks, Luke. Thank you. And great to see you all and welcome this evening. I'm very happy to go first, actually. This is quite fun. So I've got my coffee. I suggest that I'm going to talk for a bit to put my argument across. So I suggest, of course, that you all pour yourself this beautiful Chablis. First of all, I don't even need to say more than this about my argument. I opened this last night. I came to see my parents. I'm staying in a cottage next to them. And I lent this to my mum to open up and give me her opinion and bring it back to me. And there's barely anything left in the bottle. There's just enough for me to have a soupçon. So that says it more. If it's good enough for my mum, it's got to be good enough for all of you guys. But first of all, I've got to say I feel blessed. And when I was given this wine, I felt very sorry for Andrea having to come back after seeing the wine that I've been given, because anyone that can suggest that Chablis and Burgundy does not reach its apogee, Chardonnay in Chablis, then must be crazy. So I'm sorry, Andrea, that you've had to come after what I'm about to tell you guys about Chablis. So I think one of the key points actually that I'm going to keep bringing up in this debate, in this discussion, is history. And for me, the old world has that in spades. Craftsmanship. These are wines that have been owned over centuries in France and the old world. They know what to grow, they know where to grow it, they know why to grow it, they know how to grow it. It's been passed down through centuries, and we're going to see that with the two wines that we've got. Moreover, this wine that you've got in your glass now, Chablis, is just designed for the climate that you guys have there, for the weather you've got. We'll ignore the fact it's been raining, apparently, as Mark said, in Sydney, but for the warm climate that you've got, it is absolutely spot on. Chardonnay travels well. It's the second most planted grape variety in the world, white grape variety, after Ayana, which will just a table grape from Spain, and it has double the amount of plantings than Sauvignon Blanc has. So it's a grape that expresses itself well in many terroirs, but nobody can argue that it doesn't reach its apogee here in Chablis. So a little bit of history about Chablis itself. I think that it has a long history. Winemaking has a long. Are you going to show us a map of? Brilliant. It shows a map here of my two wines. Chardonnay arrived in the Chablis area, the grape itself, in the 12th century with the Cistercian monks, and it flourished. Its accessibility to Paris saw it flourish in the 15th century, and it became one of the most famed wines. Then, of course, as you know, Phylloxera, which I'll talk a little bit about with my next wine, devastated the wines of the vineyards of Europe, and Chablis sort of suffered a little bit. There used to be 40,000 hectares, believe it or not, in Chablis. And then with Phylloxera, it fell down to only 500 hectares during the 1950s. And now we're back to 5,500 hectares, which is about right. But we're going to get to the area of Chablis now. So we're halfway between Paris and the Côte d'Or, the most, perhaps the richer expression of Chardonnay that we find in the Côte d'Or. And the soils here are more similar actually to the soils of Sancerre than they are down in the famed vineyards of the Côte d'Or. So Chablis itself, you'll see it has the river Sereine that runs through the village. And we talk about Chablis, but Chablis is one village of 20 actually around Chablis. So Chablis wines can come from 20 different little villages around Chablis. And here, soils are key. And I would say that Chablis has the most famed soils in the world. The Kimmeridgian soils, which are limestone, clay, and fossilized oyster shells. And here, and this is probably one of my key arguments, you can really taste the soil in Chablis. I think more so than any other area in the world. There was an extension to the vineyards of the center of Chablis. That's a great shot actually there. of Chablis. There's an extension, I think, in the sort of 60s, 70s, where Chablis was becoming so popular that they extended it. Actually, it was later than the 70s, it might be the 80s, to extend the Petit Chablis to the more Portlandian clay soils, which I would say aren't as good as the soils of the Grand Cru and Premier Cru and even AOC Chablis. What we've got here is AOC Chablis, dare I say it, sort of standard Chablis, but even this level of Chablis, you have Premier Cru and Grand Cru, and the Grand Cru vineyards are all in one site in the center of Chablis and southwestern facing slopes. The weather here is very, very difficult. Hail is a problem, frost is a problem. It's a marginal site. And that, again, for me, I believe that truly great wines come from marginal sites. I believe that vines that have good dormancy during the winter will live longer and have more of an expression of their place. So I think that any further north in Chablis, you can't make still Chardonnay. It's all sparkling from here up. So this is the most marginal area for creating Chardonnay. As I said, weather is a problem here, frost is a problem, hail is a problem. Thank God for this vintage 2018 that they had in Chablis, because 16 and 17 were shockers with frost and hail, where the vigneron lost nearly all of their crops. So as I say, for me, marginality is really important. You want to stress those vines. You want them really to show the purity that you can get from these vineyards. How much longer have I got? Because I've still got so much to say. And we haven't even talked about the wine. How long have I got, Luke?
I reckon you've got about another 5 minutes, Sally.
Okay, brilliant. So let's get to the wine itself. As I say, I'm going to see if my mum's left me any of this beautiful Louis Moreau Chablis, which she has. And I'm going to start the day with this. So Chablis for me has it all. This is, as you see, the Louis Moreau family. I think we've got a slightly different bottling, might have a different label over here. I'm not sure if you've got the same label, but it's the same wine that we're tasting. Louis Moreau family, an important family in Chablis. This particular family, this particular wing of the family have been making wine here since 1814, I believe, maybe 1815, and goes under the name of Louis Moreau. Louis Moreau is, in fact, the name of the winemaker now and the head of the family. They have 52 hectares, which is a decent amount of land in Chablis, spread over Grand Cru, Premier Cru, and AOC Chablis, which is what we have here. They also have some Petit Chablis vineyards. As I said, Chablis itself is 5,600 hectares now. 19% of the production is Petit Chablis. 66% and the lion's share is this AOC Chablis that we're having. I think only 1 to 2% is Grand Cru, and maybe 19, 20% is Premier Cru. So the Moreau family, what's special about this? For me, one of the key things is fermentation and vessels that they use. For me, I would argue, and many people in Chablis would argue, we didn't see this in Australia, but the oak can really interfere with the expression of terroir. Here at the Moreau family, they only use stainless steel, except with one cru. I think they use it with one of their Grand Cru, maybe, I can't remember which one, Le Clos maybe, where they use old wood to flesh out the wine. Chablis is all about expressing that terroir, and you have this with this wine. It's all about expressing tension and letting those Kimmeridgian soils do their work, where you get this flinty, smoky element that I got from this wine. They also believe in only using wild yeast. So since 2009, I believe they've only used wild yeast, not cultured yeast, to also try and express terroir. Chablis is an expression, the purest expression of terroir in a glass. Oak should only be used as a textural aid. Old oak, which is used by quite a few growers over there, but it's used to add texture and weight, not to add oak flavors to the wine. So tasting this wine, firstly, 2018 was a warm vintage. So despite it being a warm vintage and a welcome vintage, as I said, after 16 and 17, which were absolute shockers, 18 was a warm vintage. So yields were back up after 16 and 17. And this, despite being from a warm vintage, they haven't seen the likes of this kind of warmth since, I think, 1982 was the other warm vintage in Chablis. So exceptional, but still it has that purity in the glass and expression of tension and precision. So for me on this wine, it's pure classic Chablis.
Excellent. And you didn't go over 10 minutes, which I'm very impressed with, Ali. Very
I haven't
concise.
finished yet. I'm only just getting going with my tasting note.
I was about to say, yeah, he's not done yet, mate.
I'm not done yet. So for me, flavors in this, you get wet wool, you get a bit of little bit of bruised apple, you get that tension, you get that acidity. It's rounded here, as I say, you're on the northern limit of making Chardonnay. The wines have to go through what we call malolactic fermentation, which is a fermentation, not an alcoholic fermentation, but it's a fermentation that happens naturally. You can suppress it, but it gives a roundness. It turns that malic acid into lactic acid and gives that roundness to the acidity and the roundness that you need. Here, it's really, really cool. If you don't have that malolactic fermentation, the wines can be very malic, they can be very direct with that acid, and you need here to round off that acidity. So despite being from a hot vintage, this is a wine that for me just shows that flintiness, that expression, that tautness that Chardonnay should show. Have I gone over time yet?
That's about time, Ali. I'll call it there.
Okay, you'll call it there. Okay, just to sum up then, for me, the purest expression of Chardonnay in a glass has to come from Chablis, and I'm looking forward to Andrea's, what I'm sure will be a compelling argument.
Well, why don't we open up the floor and maybe give the first question to Andrea? Did you have any comments or any feedback on Alistair's pitch just then?
Oh, I have plenty of comments and feedback.
The boxing gloves are out.
my 10-minute allocation. It's much easier to go second than first, I think, because there's plenty of ammunition that you get along the way. But very compelling arguments, Ali. I think we've heard them all before, so we'll be seeing what we can do to refute some of those.
Ali, we did get a comment come in from someone in the audience trying to push a bit of controversial, fun competition.
Okay.
But Michael has mentioned he loves the way these old world wines are trying more and more to be like the new world wines. Just to add a bit of fuel to that fire there.
It's gone full circle, has it? Okay. The Chablis is now mimicking Margaret River. I like that. I like that thought.
Do you have a response to that comment, Ellie? We've got a couple of minutes for questions and answers. I don't know if that was a question, but
to the new world, you know, I will put it back, and I will sort of say, and this may be a good introduction to Andrew's wines. We can look at the bruising, heavy, hefty Australian Chardonnays that flooded the market in the sort of 1990s, and you know, fantastic wines such as the Lewin Estate Art Series. These big wines, these heavy wines that were probably more influenced by certainly not by Chablis and the crisp taut expression that we got here, but wines down from further down in the Côte d'Or. And then we certainly saw, I think it was 2006 was probably the year where momentum changed in Australia, and we've then seen these sort of thin, dare I say, anemic wines coming from Mornington Peninsula, etc., where they were really picking earlier and looking to mimic Chablis. And for me, it didn't work. And I think that now, look, I'm going to be totally honest here. I'm a massive fan of Australian Chardonnay, so let's ignore that. But I think, I've probably just blown my argument. But I think that Chablis, really, really did influence. On a serious note here, did influence Australian winemakers massively, because there was a big push against the oaky styles, and Andrew might talk about this, into really mimicking what we have here, the real deal Chablis. And I think now the reality of Australian Chardonnay is somewhere in between where it was and where it went to, and I'd like to see sort of where we are now. But yeah, I think the idea that Chablis is now mimicking Australia is a very far-fetched concept for me.
it might have answered the question that Danny's just put in. He said, is Ali suggesting that Chablis is the best Chardonnay in the world? So I'll leave you to...
For me, the greatest Chardonnay in the world has to come from Burgundy. It does come from Burgundy. There's no two ways about it. It does. Whether it comes from Chablis or the Côte d'Or, personally, for my palate, I think it does come from Chablis. I think I want to see terroir in a glass. And as I said, there is nowhere in the world that expresses its soil quite like Chablis. And a second point to that, just the final point, is also value for money. And if you're looking for value for money from Burgundy, which are not sort of two things that often go hand in hand, Chablis does offer better value, I believe, at the top end. You can pick up some really good Premier Cru or Grand Cru here than the Côte d'Or further south. And yeah, I think that these are the wines, and certainly in Australia, this style of wine is just perfect for your climate. Not oaky, not heavy, but taut, saline, and fresh. And perfect with shrimps on the barbie. Last week we had, I can't remember who it was, someone was munching shrimps on the barbie, and this would just be absolutely perfect with that.
Probably
If only we had
Danny.
shrimps. If only we knew what shrimps were.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that, Ali. Obviously, lots to think about, and I'm sure Andrea's got a few rebuttals to pick up on. So with that in mind, we're going to go to wine number 2, which is, of course, the Lewin Prelude. And Andrea, you can take it away from there.
Thanks very much, Luke, and thanks very much, Ali, for giving me so much ammunition. For this.
Oh, I know. I'm asking for this, aren't I?
I'm not going to lie. I'm actually Burgundy's wine ambassador here in Australia, so I'm very familiar with the wonderful facets that Chablis has to offer. But there's a few points I'd like to quickly make before I talk really in depth about Margaret River. And the first point is about Louis Moreau. And if you meet Louis Moreau, and I did back in 2019 when he came out here, he speaks English with quite a noticeable American accent. And I wonder why that is. Well, it's actually because he did his winemaking degree in California. So here is this wonderful man who is very much a key figure in Chablis. He studied in California. He loves the freedom of a new world. And he felt the need to study in the New World so that he could perhaps enhance the quality of his Chablis and take it to the next level. So yes, I do think that the Old World has learned quite a bit from the New. And if you've been enjoying new Old World wines from France, from Spain, from Italy, from Germany, it's probably because of New World winemaking techniques that were often introduced to Europe, particularly in the 80s and 90s, by our own flying winemakers here in Australia. Prior to that, in the bad old days of the 60s and 70s, a lot of New World wines were pretty rubbish overall. There was a lot of faulty wine being produced and sold. And it's really thanks to the innovation and the really brilliant vision of many New World winemakers who weren't constrained by tradition, by history, by bureaucracy. They were able to actually experiment, innovate here in Australia and in other countries, whether that's Argentina, Chile, USA, anywhere that's not Europe, and bring that expertise to Europe, help clean up a lot of the cellars of Europe, and help to make European wines better, brighter, fresher, cleaner, and more enjoyable. And I think we see that in the Chablis we've just enjoyed from Louis Moreau. It's actually incredibly bright, very pure. But getting into Margaret River, and here we have, one of the world's most glorious wine regions. Behind me is the Prelude Vineyard from Lewin Estate. It's not a bad place to be. And Margaret River has probably been blessed with some of the best terroir to actually produce Chardonnay in the world. Of course, it's a very new region from a sort of historical point of view. It doesn't have the weight of history, but that's not to say that they didn't actually take a lot of lessons from the Old World and really kind of run with it. So they looked very carefully at where to plant in Margaret River. They realized that this area had a very similar climate to Bordeaux, a little bit drier than Bordeaux, which is quite nice. It also had quite a Mediterranean feel, which allowed them to have beautiful levels of ripeness that would be the envy of Bordeaux, and perhaps a more consistent climate, which we've seen over the last few years. So Margaret River, not only does it make spectacular Chardonnay, but also Cabernet, but it's also incredibly beautiful place to visit and to enjoy wine. And there's very few wine regions in the world where you can be sipping a magnificent world-class Chardonnay and then be off for a surf in a few short minutes. So it's absolutely glorious there. Lewin Estate itself needs very little introduction. It is one of the top estates of Australia, particularly renowned for its art series, Chardonnay, which has been gaining lots of worldwide acclaim since its release. And the Chardonnay that we have today is the little brother of art series. So we have the Prelude Chardonnay 2019. I'm going to hold it up in front of me with my fine background here. And this is really the face of modern Australian Chardonnay. Ali talked about the big, fat, buttery, oaky Chardonnays of yesteryear, and certainly Australia made their name in the 1980s with those really rich, full-bodied oaked Chardonnays, sunshine in a glass. But like many trends in the 80s, including shoulder pads and lots of blue eyeshadow, Australian winemakers actually managed to kind of tone it down and realize that perhaps less was more. And so in the new world, we're not constrained by rules, by bureaucracy, by tradition, by the weight of history. We can look at our styles of wine and change them to adapt not only to what our land and our terroir suggests, but also what consumers really want, what wine drinkers really want. And that's exactly what's happened here. So this 2019 Prelude Chardonnay is really classic new Australian Chardonnay, where you're seeing beautiful acidity. We've got some grapefruit acidity coming from particularly the Gingin clone, a very specific clone that has been highly successful in Margaret River, and that clone came from California. So another New World innovation. But also you're seeing just a very subtle oak regime here as well. So just enough to impart some beautiful toasty complexity alongside some wonderful array of fruits, including peach, nectarine, grapefruit, melon, pineapple, but also some beautiful floral aromatics as well. So we're seeing beautiful primary, bright primary fruit, which of course we associate with Australian Chardonnay, New World Chardonnay, but we're also seeing subtle, toasty hazelnut characters and a very sort of sublime oak regime, subtle, designed to enhance the wine, not designed to be thumping and be the feature of the wine. And this is really modern Australian Chardonnay now. Just a sort of quick point too about where Australian Chardonnay is in a sort of global stage. Just the other week in the UK, our esteemed colleague Ali from Liberty Wines put on an entire tasting devoted to Australian Chardonnay for the wine trade there. And it was just completely overwhelmingly a success. Looking at Chardonnay in Australia from Adelaide Hills, from Margaret River, from Tasmania, from the Yarra Valley. The state of Australian Chardonnay has never been better. The quality is fantastic, and the capacity for some of those wines to age is also incredible. So we're seeing really the absolute beginning of the wonderful potential that Australian Chardonnay has always had. It's here now. We're just discovering how great it can be.
Amazing. And that was I was just about to ring the bell, so you timed it perfectly, Andrea. Now, there was certainly a little bit of feedback and a couple of questions coming there. Michael Woodward, I can't see you on gallery view. Are you about there? Maybe not. Just whilst you're unmuting, Andrea, I'd like to ask you a question, if it's okay. When I asked you earlier in the week what wine meant to you in a word, you said transformation. Perhaps you'd like to talk about how this encompasses transformation.
Yeah, I think transformation really does express everything I think about when I think about wine, whether that's the transformation of the grape into wine, the transformation of flavors that are completely changed when they become wine, but also the way wine transforms any social situation, any beautiful occasion. It elevates and it changes everything, in my view, for the better. So in this case of New World, I think the potential of the New World is to transform the unknown, what we haven't been able to really articulate because we're so young as wine producing countries, but we can now start to explore that, see the potential for those new terroirs to be fully expressed, and that's so exciting. Amazing.
Now, Michael, I can see that you're in the gallery view. Would you like to unmute and give us your comments there?
Oh, look, I think that the two wines are spectacular, but they are different. I'm just making a controversial statement about whether we're trying to be like them or they're trying to be like us. I think we're trying to be like each other. We're trying to be like ourselves, really. But I have seen the French wines becoming a little bit more like what we used to see in Australian wine, and I'm not sure that they have been completely uninterested in what we've been doing in the New World, including in Australia and California.
Danny, you had a question there. Did you want to unmute and ask Andrea?
I always have a question. Hey, Andrea. My first one was, there was something about the judgment of Paris. I can't remember what happened. I thought you might remember.
Thanks for that, Amo. So it's 45 years since the judgment of Paris. Now, 1976, they put on a very renowned tasting of Californian wine against Bordeaux wine, blind tasting, and of course, the Californian wines won the day, much to the horror of the French judges, who were quite sure that they had awarded all of their clarets top marks. So that was really the beginning of California's huge foray into becoming accepted as a world-class producer of Cabernet Sauvignon in particular, and as Berger ran a couple of other tastings after that, and California still kind of kept coming out on top. So it wasn't sort of a one-off thing. This was the birth of a new way of thinking about wine, a way that wasn't completely shackled by history and tradition, but could use elements and the expertise of the old world to forge a new direction and a really exciting expression of those grapes in a new place.
Fantastic. Now, Ali, I gave Andrea the chance to come back to a couple of your assertions on the Chablis. Is there anything that you'd like to pick up on the Lewin?
Yeah, there's a few things I'd just like to pick up. I mean, that was a very interesting, compelling, but fundamentally flawed argument that you put across there, Andrew. So thank you for that. said in semi-jest. And I think one of the points that you and Danny, yep, you're off my Christmas card list after that very leading statement that you made for Andrea there with regards to New World. I think one of the points that you just mentioned is the potential for New World Chardonnay, and yeah, I undoubtedly agree with you on that. The potential for New World Chardonnay, the potential for Australian Chardonnay, exactly that. And we've seen Australian Chardonnay, as I mentioned earlier on, change dramatically over the last 20 years from these oak bombs that we had, that really certainly weren't sophisticated or elegant wines, but were, hit the zeitgeist of the times, and were certainly in that Parkerized, flashy time of the 80s, 90s, fitted the bill. And it was really Australian Chardonnay finding its feet, and then we saw the backlash after 2006, where the wines became, you know, as I think Michael agreed with me, they became anemic, and the wines from Mornington Peninsula really, you know, just picking wines early does not mimic what's happening in Chardonnay, in Chablis, sorry. That's not the way to make wine. They're beginning to find their feet now. They are certainly beginning to find their feet. And there is wonderful potential with Chardonnay in Australia. But I don't think today we're really talking about potential. We're talking about actual. We're talking about what's in the glass. We're talking about what there is. So for me, I would say that my final argument for choosing the Chablis tonight is, you know, we can all think about what's going to happen in 50, 60, 70 years. But actually, while Chardonnay in Australia has the potential to be world-class, and occasionally is, I think the actual reality is now that what you have here with the Chablis is actual, and it's been honed over years. And I take your argument of being restricted by the strict regulations, but those strict regulations are there in the old world because they know what works there. So yeah, that would be my comeback to those points there. But I am also a fan of many Australian Chardonnays, just so you know.
Hugh, I noticed that you'd unmuted. Did you want to give us a question or any feedback? Looks like we've lost Hugh. Okay, no problem at all. Perhaps we'll pick up on that one in a second, Hugh. But Mark, if we can just grab the screen again, and we'll launch quiz question number 1, so we can move forward. So, Masters of Wine make up what % of the population? I'm not even going to bother reading that out.
To the power of 8, to the power of 6, or to the power of 4?
This is another classic Mark favourite question.
Classic Mark, yes, exactly.
Now, I should
nerd question.
I should say to everybody who's new to the Wheel of Wine, please answer with 1, 2, or 3. Don't worry about the full answer. I think you'd be there all night having to type out all of those zeros anyway. But just remember to go to the number on the screen with your name, your email, and the answer 1, 2, or 3.
Just while that's going on, I'll just answer. Danny had another question in there that I just want to touch on quickly as kind of the in between, the arbiter between the two sides here in regards to climate change. And Danny asked, is it going to affect Australia more than Europe, or vice versa? That's a very, very good question, and very, very hard to answer. But I think one advantage that the New World has over the Old World is the opportunity to plant alternate varietals that are potentially better suited to a changing climate. In Chablis, I can't see them planting anything other than Chardonnay for the foreseeable future. Whereas and I hope they don't change the Margaret River too much. I hope it's Chardonnay for forever and a day, but there is the opportunity to change to different grape varieties. And we are already seeing a huge growth in the alternate varieties being grown in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all throughout the New World. So hopefully that answers your question, Danny.
Okay, we'll leave it up there for another 20 seconds or so, I reckon, just so everyone can get their answers in. Fred, have we got you back yet or not? Looks like you're still... No, Fred's not there.
Interesting point, actually, just following up on that climate change thing, Mark. I don't know if anyone's seen recently in the drinks business world that they've just permitted actually another, Andrew might know, I can't remember how many, another 5 or 6 grapes that can be planted in, you might know, Mark. There's a couple of Portuguese ones, I think Marcelin, I can't remember which ones, but
there's 6 more in Bordeaux. Yeah, 6 more in Bordeaux. Yeah. So it's Touriga Nacional, Marcelin, Castet, Harina Rosa, are the reds, and the white grapes are Alvarinho and Lilo Rila, I think it's called.
Yeah, Alvarinho was an interesting one. I couldn't quite work that out, but they are, and climate change in the old world is being taken very seriously, and it's something I always ask, and I'll talk actually a little bit about that perhaps in the next wine. It is a genuine concern in both the New World and the Old World, Danny, and I think they're certainly aware of that in the Old World, and they have been taking steps. But of course, when you have stringent regulations, it is harder to just go and plant these things. They do need to go through more bureaucracy, and the French and the old world, they're very, very good at bureaucracy. So it can take a while to get those things to go through.
Yes, to that point, they've only been permitted as experimental varieties for Bordeaux AC, so the lowest generic level of Bordeaux. It's going to take the Bordelais many, many years to see the results of those plantings, to see whether it's really viable. And I would argue they don't have the luxury of that kind of time, particularly with Merlot. And so, although, yes, they are reacting, I think it's too slow.
I totally agree with you, and I think that is a very, it is a part of their bureaucracy over there. I think there's certain areas, and actually I'll talk about that with my next wine, certain areas that are better placed to mitigate climate change
I'll tell you what,
than others.
Ali, let's move on, because I'm sure everybody's itching to get into wine number 3, and fly back up to the old world and go up into the Rhone and have a look at the Leneth. So Mark, if you want to just move us on a slide. Do you want
to just give us the answer, please, Luke?
What is the answer, Mark? I actually don't have it on my notes. I'm sorry.
The answer is it's answer 1. So it's there are 408 masters of wine amongst just shy of 8 billion people. So it is to the power of 8. Yes.
You'll be one of those soon enough, won't you, Mark?
Let's hope so.
Hint, 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 wink, wink, Andrea.
We'll do the best to get you there, Mark. Definitely. Well, that's an interesting statistic, isn't it? Look at that. Okay, so it's back to me.
Yeah, crack on.
Okay, brilliant. Well, hopefully, I enjoyed that first round. I look forward to seeing the results, and happy to move on to the second. I said I was happy to go first, but actually, Andrea, you're quite lucky to have some ammunition to come back at me with. So I'll see if I can see what I can do with this one. So second wine, please do obviously pour this wine, the Chateau Lanneux Les Cassagne Côte de Rhône Village 2018. Pour that for you. So we're going to the Rhone Valley. Now, arguably, I would say this is the most revered winemaking area by Australian winemakers. And we're talking about the Rhone Valley, but let's be honest, the North and the Southern Rhone are two distinctly different areas. They're worlds apart. They should be two different appellations as far as I'm concerned. They're connected by a river, but they're so distinct. The northern part of the Rhone that you've got there, you see such famous names as Hermitage, Côte Rôtie, Croix Hermitage, Condrieu, Chateau Grillé. And here, these beautifully steep granite slopes are home to some of the world's most beautiful vineyards. Here, we're dominated by one great variety in reds. It's Syrah, or Shiraz, as it's known in Australia, or Viognier or Marsanne. Viognier is probably the most important, dare I say it? No, actually it's not. Viognier and Marsanne and Roussanne are the whites, but it's all about, we're talking about reds really today. It's all about Syrah. And here, these edgy, acidic, crunchy, long-lived Syrahs are really what they would wish they could make in many parts of Australia, dare I say it. But I can see Andrea's face. So here, as we go up from the Northern Rhone, we're going down to the Southern Rhone, because that's where we're going. As you travel down to the Southern Rhone from the steep slopes of the north, it opens up and becomes a little bit more sprawling. You enter a world of olive groves, cicadas are chirping in the background, you've got lavender fields, there's rugged areas with mountainous outcrops. It's a really beautiful area. It's less verdant. And the smell of the air down here in the Southern Rhone is really something. You're on your way to Provence. You've got garrigue and lavender in the air. It's an unmistakable area. You can taste it in the wine that you've got in front of you as well. Here, GSM rules. That's a term probably coined in Australia, I believe, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre. But of course, these are the grapes that they stole from the Southern Rhone and brought over to Australia. And I can see some faces, some perturbed faces.
Shots fired.
Shots fired. So we're talking about here Côte de Rhône. We've got Côte de Rhône Village here. And Côte de Rhône can mean a blend of wines from the north and the south of Rhône, but really it means wines from the south of Rhône. 5% of the red wines, 5% of wines full stop in the Rhone Valley come from the north. 95% come from the southern Rhone. So really, when we see Côte de Rhône, it can have some fruit from the north, but nearly always it's going to be Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, Grenache dominated from here down in the southern Rhone. And I would argue actually that Côte de Rhône, it's a large appellation. It's 55,000 hectares can be used for Côte de Rhône, is probably the most reliable and best value AOC wine that there is in France. Commercial viticulture started down here from the 2nd century in the Romans, but it was really when the papal seat was moved from Rome to Avignon in the 1300s that we really saw vines started to flourish in this area. There was a very sad and catastrophic story that started just miles from the wine that you're drinking here. That was the very unfortunate introduction of phylloxera into Europe. And I'll just tell you the little story about this. In the village of Lirac, there was a Frenchman called Monsieur Borty who had vines in his backyard. And he had a visit from a friend of his, Mr. Cool from America, who came over, and they were both very into their vines. And he said, "Oh, wow, back over in America, I've got some beautiful vines. I'm going to send you some over." And the next year, a package arrived, and it arrived at Monsieur Borty's house in Lirac. He unpacked it, and there were vines with their roots. He planted them in his garden, and that, unfortunately, was the beginning of phylloxera devastating the vineyards of the southern Rhone, and eventually the whole of Europe. So it was in the southern Rhone that sadly the phylloxera epidemic started. But we put that behind us. The southern Rhone in Europe has rebuilt itself. Down here, anyway, we'll get back to the wine that we've got and the southern Rhone. We've got a Mediterranean climate down here. You have mild winters, you have hot summers. The Mistral wind is very important. And Mark and Anthony know all about this. When we were there last year, you go running in Châteauneuf-du-Pape and around there, and if the Mistral is blowing, it's very hard, especially if it's going front onto you. I think, Mark, you turned back after about a mile, didn't you?
It was much easier going in the opposite direction.
It's very easy, and it's almost impossible not to fall over when the Mistral wind comes down from the north. It's a very powerful wind that plays an important part in viticulture in these parts. It's important for drying out the vines and cooling the vines, because actually here it's a very hot area in the summer. And there's not so much rainfall down here, but when there is rainfall, there's a risk of mildew and fungus in the vineyard, and that Mistral wind can really dry out the vineyards. So as I said, we've got 56,000 hectares of vines down here. The appellation of Côte de Rhône was formed in 1966. Bush vines rule down here. As you see, these gnarled old little vines rule down here, and they rule because they're better placed to deal with drought, and drought is a real issue down here. So these are vines that can get their roots deeper. They provide more shading for the grapes in this heat. And these are vines, these bush vines you'll see also in the Barossa Valley and all over Australia as well. They're very good for coping with hot conditions. We have down here soils, without going too much into them. We have a blend of soils, alluvial soils, sandstone soils, limestone soils, and the famed galets roulés soils, the pudding stones that you see in the vineyards of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And La Nerte is a famed estate from Châteauneuf-du-Pape. These big stones that hold the heat during the day and reflect them back to the vines, giving warm, I'm not going to say jammy, but rich wines such as this that we've got here. Pretty much no irrigation is allowed down here, as in the most of France. You do get a little bit of irrigation allowed in extremely warm vintages. Moving on to this wine particularly, Chateau La Nerte, and I'm going to go back to this history argument that I've got. They've been making wines at Chateau La Nerte since 1560, and I can't remember when Australia was colonized, but it was a long time after this. I don't know, a couple of hundred years ago. So they'd already been making
people have been
wine
here for about 40,000 years, but you know.
Well, you know, in winemaking terms, it's been a while. So Chateau La Nerte is an estate from Châteauneuf-du-Pape. This isn't the Châteauneuf-du-Pape that we're drinking now. This is another estate that they've bought, which is in the Massif du Chaux area, which is about 10 miles north of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and an estate called Domaine de la Rangade. Don't know if we've got that on the map. They farm everything organically down here and biodynamically. Actually, no, this isn't biodynamic, but there's a lot of biodynamic farming goes on down here. This is a warm area, little disease pressure. Therefore, organics rule down here. And I think organics are a really important part of the Southern Rhone wines and the taste profile that you get. I'm a big advocate for organics and biodynamics and the purity that they can show in the wines in the glass. So we're looking here at the three grapes, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. Now, tasting this wine, I adore this wine. As I say, I opened the Chablis and my mum raided it last night, and my dad has done exactly the same. So there's only a little bit left in here last night, but only a few hours ago. He's a big Rhone fan, and this met the father's seal of approval. About this wine, yeah, 60% Grenache, 30% more Syrah, 10% Mourvedre. What do you get from those grapes down here? For me, the Grenache gives this wine this beautiful strawberry, wild strawberry scent. And then behind it, you have the Syrah that can give, it's warm down there. It's not the big jammy style that you can get from Barossa. It's a little bit more olive tapenade, going towards some licorice character. And then you have the 10% Mourvedre, which gives a savory meatiness. One thing that I think is really important for this wine is that the grapes are co-fermented, which means that all of the grapes are fermented together. Very often grapes are not fermented together. They're fermented in different parcels and then blended. But for me, I think you get this juicier, more vibrant expression when the grapes are co-fermented. I think they're perhaps more together. They're more knit together, and that's certainly something that you get in this wine. So for me, you've got that plummy olive character, garrigue as well. And by garrigue, we mean these herbal scrubland that you get down there. There's a beautiful herbal perfume that you get in this wine. I think this is great value for money, but it's all about the purity and the expression and these seamless tannins that you get in this wine. I generally, when I opened this wine last night, I was hugely impressed. 2018 was a difficult vintage in the Rhone, and difficult vintages are something that you're used to dealing with in Australia when we're talking about heat. And 2018 was a very warm vintage down in the Rhone. It followed a very wet spring, so yields were down, and then you had a hot, long summer. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about climate change. So we talked about Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre being important down here, but I think having those three grape varieties. And then when we look at Châteauneuf-du-Pape, they have 13 permitted grape varieties. We can see more scope for adapting to climate change down here.
Ali, I'm going to have to interrupt you there. Apologies in doing so. That was just a minute over 10.
No.
Yeah. When you get on a roll. Did you have any closing statements you'd want to give us in 20 seconds or less? Just and then we'll open it up to the floor.
Yeah, I guess with the wine that's coming, I think what I think this wine shows about the Southern Rhone and really shows that expression of the place as well. You can smell and taste the Southern Rhone. As I say, it's got an extraordinary Provence as well as the same, and you can taste and smell that in the glass. And I think this is a really fantastic effort from a warm vintage down there that shows the juiciness and the vibrancy that I think often is quite difficult to find. Maybe the subtlety with a lot of the wines from the New World. But I think this to me is one of the a beautiful mini Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which again I think few would argue isn't one of the greatest wines in the world.
Andrea, I'll flip that over to you. Any thoughts on that?
Well, as usual, Ali had lots of interesting points, none of which are new to me. So there's lots of ammunition again, but I have to say this Côte d'Aron Village is actually a very, very well-made wine, and certainly a much better expression Côte d'Aron Village than many others that I have seen. And perhaps that is the sort of biodynamics at play. But I'm a big fan of biodynamics and organic viticulture as well. But of course, that's really hard to do in places like Chablis, isn't it, Ali? Yeah. It's a bit tricky.
Do you know what? It is hard to do in Chablis. You're absolutely right. It is very difficult to do. But that doesn't mean that they can't capture the purity in the glass purely by organics or biodynamics. But yeah, no, it is hard to do in certain climates. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've seen a very perhaps almost atypical Côte d'Rône village in terms of its quality and expression. But it's a lovely wine to see. But of course, we have quite a bit of amazing Grenache in Australia. So I'll speak to that in a minute.
Fantastic.
Actually, Ali, there was a question that came through whilst you were talking. Now that we're in the Q&A section, so where are the oldest Grenache vines in the world?
Well, I think this sounds again like a load of questions. Like I'm probably expected to say that they must be in Australia, and I know what's coming from Andrea. I can just hear it already. What's coming and the comparisons with the Rhone and thing. But I believe they might be in California. I'm not sure. They're probably in Australia, aren't they?
Still New World, though, isn't it?
It is. Sadly, that old vine argument, due to obviously phylloxera, is very difficult to counter. And again, I suppose my counter would be, I think the age of vines can play a really important role in wine quality, but to suggest that vine age is the key proxy in quality, I think would be a real struggle to agree with that. I think old vines, and I'm a big fan of old vines, in many ways. They look amazing, they look majestic, they're beautiful. But it's not the only answer to quality. It can help, but it can also be detrimental, I think. They can also carry huge amounts of disease. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Bit of a loophole with the phylloxera, isn't it?
It is a tragic one.
Let's open up the floor just whilst we've got a couple more minutes in the Q&A section to some guest feedback. Hugh, I can see you guys are enjoying the red there. Did you guys have any tasting notes or questions for Ali? No? Thumbs up if you're enjoying it, at least.
I saw Francesco.
There we go.
Big thumbs up from Francesco. I'm pleased to see all the thumbs up, and I think actually this really is a beautiful wine, and Châteauneuf have showed their expertise. From, as I say, from 1560 they've been farming in Châteauneuf-du-Pape and bought this estate, I think in 1986. They got 50 hectares here. They've really taken their know-how from Châteauneuf-du-Pape to this estate, and year in, year out, this really is an overachieving wine for the price. Superb value for money. But again, coming back, I think Andrea sort of suggested that Côte d'Rône can be, not as good. And of course, not all Côte d'Rône is as good. But I think the landscape down there, the fact that they can farm, they have little disease pressure most of the time, does mean that they can produce beautiful fruit year in, year out, and consistent fruit. And they're well placed to deal with climate change. I was just talking about that, but we're going to see more Sanso. I'm a huge fan of the grape Sanso. We're going to see more of that being planted down there, and it's already permitted down there. So looking at the climate change argument, I think certain areas such as the Rhone Valley are really well placed because there's many different grape varieties already established there. We've got Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, we've got Carignan, we've got Sanso, to name but 5 red grape varieties. You've got Counoise, you've got other grape varieties that can really do well with heat. So I think actually in the southern Rhone, and we're seeing far more Sanso being planted. It was something I asked when I was in the Rhone in October covering the wines. The winemakers a lot, the Mourvèdre as well is better placed. We're seeing less Syrah. Syrah can't really deal with the heat that's increasing. Grenache struggling a little bit, but I think, grapes like Counoise, grapes like Sanso, grapes like Mourvèdre are going to increase in importance and are increasing importance in areas like Châteauneuf-du-Pape.
Amazing. Peter, you always give us some great feedback. 3 wines tasted. Any thoughts?
Hi everyone. Luke and Alistair, you would have realised that for the first time in a year, since your very first online Zoom, when we did actually try the Lewin estate, remember it was a Chablis night? I've got all my
Chardonnay tasting
here, all my kids are here.
Hey!
Hello.
Nice to see you all.
Team Giorgio.
Including our son, who's been able to come up from Melbourne finally with all the lockdowns. So,
fantastic.
So that leads me, that's a good segue to, you were talking about what word does wine evoke before. And transformation was one of the things. For me, it's always been something that Louis Pasteur said. He said, penicillin cures, but wine makes people happy.
There you go.
And we're very happy today. So far, the whites have been a really even thing. We've liked both the French, the new and the old world. The reds have caused a little bit of strain in the group. There's some very partisan opinions with the reds. And my personal one, I'm having to lean to the Aussie. I really like the Aussie one. The Lanert is a classic, sort of what you expect. But in terms of value for money, etc., I've personally gone with the Aussie. But it's interesting how we love both of the whites. It was sort of unanimous, but the reds caused a little bit of tension in the room.
Oh,
Very
okay.
good.
Lots of tension.
And that's before Andrea's even had her chance to argue her corner. But do you know what? It's Peter. It's great to see you with the whole family there. So, and it's nice to sort of see the family. And I agree with you. I think that wine is such an important tool in conviviality and bringing people together and sharing. And I love these sessions. It gets me in contact with you guys, and it's really, really nice to see you there with your family and enjoying the wines.
Ali, you should bring your parents in. We want to see their vote.
Do you know what? It's 8:30 in the morning, and they're downstairs somewhere hidden. Because we're socially distancing. It's all a bit weird. So we're sort of seeing each other, but at distance.
I think Ali, you need some support. Perhaps when we open up United Cellars UK, we can run this debate again, and Ali can have a home stadium.
Yeah, I think that might be fair.
Okay, well, we're running a little bit over, but I'm really enjoying it and hope everybody else is. So I think that's absolutely fine. But we do want to have a look at wine number 4. So Andrea, I'm going to hand over to you.
Fantastic. Well, what a great wine to finish this tasting with. A classic, a GSM blend. And yes, I think the term GSM was coined in Australia. We're very good at having very clear, easy to read labels that are transparent and get rid of the sort of stuffiness out of wine, just like really
basic, maybe a little bit basic.
So a beautiful wine to finish. And this is, of course, from the Barossa. We have the Rusden Drift Sand GSM blend. And yes, the oldest Grenache grapes are Australian. We have vines here in the Barossa Valley that date, that are still in continuous production since 1850, which is one of the marvels of the wine world, because of course we didn't suffer from phylloxera like Europe did. We were able to get, not steal, Ali, acquire clones from Europe, perfectly legally acquired clones, I might add, and plant them in exactly where we thought they might work. And of course, Grenache was one of those grapes. Grenache has always been an underdog in Australian wine. It was historically used for fortified wine production. So many of the great wines of Australia pre-World War II, which were fortified wines, were based largely around Grenache. And for a long time, a lot of producers just didn't see the potential of Grenache as a great grape to stand out amongst others. There wasn't the sort of respect for the Southern Rhone grapes as much as there was, of course, for Syrah in the Northern Rhone or Cabernet Sauvignon in Bordeaux. Grenache was sort of soft, slurpable, easy drinking and not taken so seriously. However, we have now discovered that Grenache has many faces in Australia. You can make very rich, full-bodied styles as a single variety or as a blend with Shiraz and Mourvèdre, or Mataro as we often refer to it. Or you can make very fragrant, fresh, delicate, slightly lighter bodied wines, which I think really show, in my personal view, Grenache at its best. And when I first arrived in Australia in 2003, I remember tasting a Barossa Grenache, and it was almost, you could almost stand a spoon in it. It must have been 15.5, 16% alcohol, sort of 200% new French oak. And it was almost undrinkable. And I thought, hold on, this doesn't taste anything like Grenache that I know. And I sort of asked around, and I soon discovered that they were still trying to make fortified wine. They just weren't fortifying it. But those times have changed, thankfully. And so here we are in the Barossa Valley, of course, Australia's best known wine region. If you ask anyone about Australian wine around the world, they'll probably only be able to name Barossa as a region. It's done such a great job at that sort of regional branding piece. And of course, we think of the Barossa as a valley, but there's many different sub-regions. There's lots of terroir in the Barossa Valley these days, and winemakers are really working hard to express certain sites, certain sub-regions of the Barossa as they discover more and more about this wonderful region. It's warm in the Barossa, there's no doubt about it, and there is lots of pressure in terms of water use. But with Grenache, that's less of a problem, because actually Grenache doesn't require nearly as much water to grow as other varieties. So in terms of adaptability to climate change, Grenache certainly has an edge, and it already is a proven grape in the warm Mediterranean climates of the Southern Rhone, of course. Rusden itself, as a producer, here was a great story of grape growers who finally decided to actually make their own wines, take matters into their own hands, and sixth generation grape growers, now onto the seventh generation, making beautiful, expressive Grenache-based wines from Vinevale in the Barossa. And I think with this particular wine, we see everything that is great about Australian wine. There is upfront fragrance and perfume, which you expect from Grenache. You're seeing beautiful, very ripe strawberry, red plum characteristics, but you're also seeing a slight hint of florals and spice notes, most likely also coming from the Shiraz and the Mourvedre here. Unlike the bad old days of 2003, this wine has not been over-oaked. It's absolutely perfectly pitched. They've just had a very old seasoned oak regime just to give the wine a little bit of structure. And what you see really here on the palate is freshness, but also opulence, a wonderful brightness and expression of fruit, but still perfectly pitched, and nothing is out of place. And that is the new face of Grenache and Grenache-based blends in Australia. So really exciting to see. I think it's absolutely delicious, has a beautiful finish. Do I still have some time up my sleeve, Luke?
Well, look, if you want to call it that, I think conciseness and being short and sweet is good. You have about 3 minutes left.
I still have 3 minutes. I have 3 minutes. I'll take it, actually. Just to refute a couple of things that Ali said, aside from the fact that we stole the clones, he implied, which is incorrect. But also a little bit about history and climate change adaptability. One of the issues which Ali mentioned is that they are really not able to irrigate in the Southern Rhone at the moment. And of course, they're going to have to look at that very carefully, because climate is changing, it's getting warmer, things are getting drier as well, and vines are becoming more and more stressed. So they're going to have to start to change their bureaucracy, which is quite a slow process in France. And I lived in France, and it's almost impossible to get anything done from a bureaucratic point of view unless you have multiple papers, multiple hours to spend tearing your hair out. The other point I wouldn't mind refuting as well is this notion of history as being kind of integral to quality. I just think that is something we in Australia can kind of throw off. Of course, we have a huge history as a country. There have been people on this land for many thousands and thousands of years, But as a winemaking production, of course, it's a very new country. But we have taken everything that the old world has learned, and we have used that to our advantage to really discover what mistakes were already made, and so to avoid those, and also to really be able to forge ahead and make the best wines possible from really astonishing sites that perhaps we would not have otherwise discovered if we had been so conservative like they are in Europe. So I do think Australia has an advantage in terms of climate change. I think we are able to react faster. We're more agile. We have the capacity to change grape varieties, as Ali was mentioning. They're probably going to have to do that in the Southern Rhone. And so the whole tradition argument about how European wine is fantastic because it's so traditional, well, I don't think we're going to see much tradition in the next 50 years coming out of the New World. And I say that with quite a heavy heart. But I do think that the climate change will actually force most of what we see as European wine, traditional styles, into a new world paradigm. And of course, we're already there. We're already well placed to deal with that.
Great stuff. Well, let's open up the floor. I'm going to start with Ali, as you know, give you the right to come back, and then we're going to open up the floor. Ali, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Again, a very compelling argument, and I was pretty sure I was going to hear some of those things coming back from Andrea regarding, you know, the oldest vines and the like, and the history and the not shackled by tradition, and there's a part of me, I'm not gonna deny it, that does agree with that there is often advantages to be had by not shackled by tradition and centuries of bureaucracy. However, you know, looking specifically at the Rhone Valley, I think that they are well placed to deal with that element of climate change with, you know, those great varieties are already there. So Sanso being there, it's been established for years. These are great varieties I think can just step up and even enhance areas such as the Southern Rhone. I think that seeing those elegant great varieties coming in can be more. And then I'm just going to leave it, you know, if we're looking at the old world suffering in the face of climate change, perhaps more than the new world, I would just point out one very, very good example in the old world of how it's benefiting from climate change. And that's right here in the UK. That's here with English sparkling wine, which has benefited massively from the shifting climate. Taittinger buying land up here in the south of England. You know, here we're going to see, and this is, you know, semi tongue-in-cheek, but not really, the greatest sparkling wines in the world are going to be coming from England in 50, 60, 70 years. And that's because of climate change and soil type. It's a bit of a broad sweeping statement, but, you know, it's already happening very, very quickly. So where in the new world, they might be able to adapt quicker to climate change. I would also argue that actually in Australia, it's very difficult to adapt even more. You can mitigate climate change through certain viticultural practices and looking for new areas. But still, you know, even in the cooler areas, Tasmania perhaps apart, and Mornington, I'll be struggling to say that would, you know, is in the same category, but you know, it won't be long before we're seeing great wines made in Yorkshire in England, or in Sweden, even in the old world. So the old world, we might think of France, Italy, Spain, but no, we've got other countries that are benefiting as well, such as the UK. So climate change is going to also perhaps benefit certain old world countries.
The problem, if Yorkshire does start making wines, they won't give them to anybody else, being Yorkshiremen.
They won't. They're very kind to people in Yorkshire.
Well, let's open up the floor for some questions. Jodie and Katie, what are your thoughts?
Hi, we're getting there. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Sorry.
What are our thoughts? Yes, we've been chatting away here.
Yeah.
The GSM's amazing, and I'm a massive fan of Australian GSM, but that French one has got me thinking. So
yeah,
it's quite an interesting discussion point, especially with the climate change.
Yeah, and we're just also discussing, would England be classed as a New World wine if they're now producing.
If they're just starting out.
Yeah,
so to
and
speak.
I do know that they have a lot of vineyards already around the country, but now that they're getting more into it and more world known.
Well, really good question. But actually, you know, we think of the sort of new English wine industry as being exactly that new. It's not. Actually, there were, you know, we were colonized by the Romans, and there were vineyards all over England, you know, many years ago. And so it's this whole old world, new world. I mean, we look at Chile as classed as New World, yet they've been making wine in Chile since 1550, since the vines were taken over by the Spanish, and they were making wines there. You know, the great wines of the Medoc, the great wines from Pauillac didn't happen until after that, you know, until the swampland that was there was drained by the Dutch, you know, so the great wines of Pauillac are actually behind a lot of the rustic wines that were coming from Chile. And talking about old vines as well, Chile actually has got vines that are nearly 300 years old that I've seen. It's a phenomenal place. But so I think this old world, England would be old world. You know, they have been making wine here for a long time, longer than, you know, South Africa as well, as 1600s they've been making wine there. So and in all honesty, and I shouldn't be saying this now until the debate's been totally finished, but I think this old world, new world concept is actually a pretty dated concept. You know, there's so many things. It's increasingly very difficult, certainly, and Andrew was saying, in the Master of Wine exams, to say, is this old world, is this new world? With techniques in the winery as well as viticultural techniques, it's very difficult really to make this old world. And I think it's wonderful, and I think there's elements of truth in all of the arguments, but increasingly it's very difficult to really buy into this old world, new world argument, despite
Ali, what did we say about sticking to the script? I mean,
you know, I could have waited a little bit longer, but you know, I think, as I say, elements of it I do believe in, and elements, you know, and I'm sure Andrew's exactly the same. I think it would be very difficult to really put your neck on the line and say you think that old world wines are better than new world, or vice versa. Everyone learns from
true.
Everyone learns from each other. But yeah, I hope that, Jodie and Katie, I hope that answers your question a little bit about England. And but for me, it would be classed as old world.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your question, Jodie and Katie. Andrea, sorry, there was one question for you from Fred. He was requesting a bit more history about the Rusden family that you had touched on before, with the GSM that we're drinking.
Yeah, so the Rusdens were, as I mentioned, grape growers. So Christine was a sixth generation grape grower. And of course, when you're a grape grower, you're a price taker. And most of the grapes grown in a large amount of Australian wine are basically bought by some of the larger companies. And so as a grower, you have very little control over your sort of financial destiny. And so in the 1990s, they set out to actually produce their own wine. And their son has actually went and worked with Rockford in Barossa. So he gained a magnificent experience there, and then has now taken over the winemaking along with his wife, Amy, who's managing sort of the front of house cellar door side of things. So they're a really typical story in Australian wine of growers who have had historically really beautiful vineyards that were perhaps not really being articulated because they were being bought by, you know, big brand wines and being blended away, taking matters into their own hands and getting that chance to kind of fulfill their own destiny, which has been really wonderful. And of course, if you can manage to make your own wine, brand it, and get it out to market, you have a much better financial outcome than just selling grapes. So that's been a wonderful story. They've also had to they regrafted their Grenache Shiraz Mourvèdre vines, because you might recall there was a very terrible idea by the Australian government to rip out all of our old vine Grenache at some point in the 1980s. And they actually paid grape growers huge amounts of money as an incentive to literally get rid of these Grenache vines, which was absolutely catastrophic. They actually grafted over their very old vine fruit to white varieties, but they kept the rootstocks. And then when they realized, actually, oh, made a mistake, they went back through the vineyard and hand planted back all of the Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvèdre that they had transformed over to white varieties. So what we're tasting here is actually still very old vine, old rootstock wine, and yet the variety itself has just been replanted, head planted.
Interesting on that one, Andrea. When you're talking about the terrible thing of grubbing up all those beautiful vines, that's actually another terrible idea that they've stolen from the French, I believe. The French were also responsible for ripping up all these beautiful old vine Carignan from the Languedoc and the Rhone back in the 80s. So, despite stealing all the good things from France, Australia, they also stole the really bad ideas as well of ripping up these beautiful old vineyards. And it's a travesty, really, that they did that. And it's very sad. And that's happened not just in Australia, but in France as well, of course.
Are you saying the Australians are unoriginal, Ali?
I would never say that.
I know you wouldn't. I'll say it for you. I'm from New Zealand. It's okay. I'm just kidding.
Certainly, the English rugby team get accused of that quite a lot lately.
Oh, we're not going to go there at the moment.
Anyway, as you can see, we've put the final quiz question up on the screen there. Another classic Mark Faber, I'm sure you'd agree. For the final examination of the Master of Wine, how many wines must be tasted blind? Is it answer 1, 12, answer 2, 24, or answer 3, 36? And obviously the MWs in the room can't answer this.
That number is etched into my brain forever. So it's something I'm sure it is with Andrew as well.
It's only a small matter of post-traumatic stress.
Oh, dear.
And not to give away the answer, just being curious, do you have to get 100% of those right? No.
No. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness you don't. No, it's all about putting across a convincing argument, really, for a lot of these wines. And it does go back a little bit to what I just suggested there, that increasingly it's nigh on impossible just to pick up a wine and say that comes from that vineyard. And it's you see this party trick that certain people can do, but not very often, pick up a wine and say, oh, that's, a Château Lennert 2018, whatever. It's increasingly difficult to do that. So you have to put your arguments across in a succinct way of why you think it comes from where it comes from. And you can get certain elements wrong, but still score quite highly through your reasoning and your logical deduction.
Show your workings, as they say in maths.
Exactly that.
So just whilst everyone's getting their last text message in, we did have a question from Hugh talking about the percentages GSM, Shiraz or Syrah, and Mataro or Mourvèdre. Is there any differences between New World, Old World? Is it fairly consistent across both?
Do you mean in terms of what the varietal composition of a given wine would be?
Yes.
Yeah, that's very producer specific and vintage specific as well. I mean, generally in the Southern Rhone, Grenache will be the dominant variety, but it is possible in Côte d'Ivoire to have Syrah as a dominant variety. It's unusual, but they sometimes do that. In Australia, it's completely up to the producer, and sometimes with Grenache can be very difficult to grow. It can have real problems with flowering, and so occasionally you will see producers and brands actually change the varietal composition. And one wine that comes to mind is the Penfolds Bin 138, which is generally a GSM blend, but they've actually made, in some very difficult Grenache years, they've made a SGM blend because it was just too hard to find enough Grenache to actually have that as the dominant variety. But they like to lead with Grenache. I think it's when you're looking for a juicy, bright, fresh, ripe strawberry fruit, Grenache is really what you're looking for.
Yeah,
great. So just before we lead into closing statements, I'm just going to open up the floor one last time, guys. Obviously, it's a privilege to have two MWs in the room. So just wanted to see if anyone had any final questions. I think we've covered everything from the chat box. Is there anything on the floor? Jane, did you have anything there?
Just surprised at how many people got this question wrong and everyone got the last one right. Just a little, yeah, observation there. No, but I think I do really agree with what Ali said earlier about the old world, new world sort of argument. Despite the fact that we thought this would be a fun topic, it is increasingly becoming less and less valid. As you can see, you know, old world are taking on controversially some principles of the new world. The new world has developed their own style and they're able to compete against each other in these, you know, sort of in this wine competition. So yeah, no, I just thank you everyone for joining.
Okay, so we've come to closing statements. Each of our MWs is going to get about 1.5 minutes to just cover off where they've gone and, you know, what they want you to finally finish on. So I think we'll do ladies first this time. Andrea, take it away.
Thanks, Luke. Well, I think you'll have seen tonight that Australia and the New World in general can hold its own in the esteemed company of Bourgogne, such as we see with Chablis, and of course the Rhone wine that we saw tonight. I think one thing to take away from this evening is the idea that all great things that we think of in terms of art, music, science, come from a willingness to innovate, a willingness to transform, a willingness and a vision to push boundaries and to go through to another frontier. And that is the magic of the New World. We have been able to do that. We'll continue to do that for the foreseeable few millennia. Whereas I do worry about our old world traditional winemaking regions in their ability to adapt in a very challenging climate. So I think our New World wines no longer need to look in the rearview mirror and to reflect back on Europe. We can hold our own and we can go forward with great pride about that.
Amazing. And that was 1 minute 20, so you're bang on. Alistair.
Okay, for me, I think what we've seen tonight with the two wines that I've showed, exactly how, for me, expression of terroir in a glass, I think, is a fundamental part of wine that we all love. I mean, there are industrial wines that we all drink that are really just about giving pleasure and providing a glass of wine and refreshment. But when we're talking about the finer end of wine, and I think certainly with the first wine, Chablis, we've talked about, is the ultimate expression of its place. And I think we really can't underestimate that when in this argument, because really Andrea's talked about the potential. It's talked about what can be offered in the New World. But as I said earlier on, what's actually in the glass. And when you look at Chablis, that they know the soils, they know them inside out, and they know how to express that. They're still learning in the New World, and they're learning very quickly. But we've seen with Chardonnay, especially, it really has, in the last 20 years, gone from one extreme to the other and is still finding its feet. So for me, if we're looking at the argument of Old World, New World, specifically with Chablis, I don't think there's any doubt that this isn't the ultimate expression of what it should be, and Chablis continues to do that. And then just looking at the restraint of the Old World versus the New World, I'll just echo back to what I said a few minutes ago with regards to other Old World countries and other Old World areas looking well. Who's to say that Champagne can't be producing Chablis-esque wines, or that England can't be producing Champagne-style wines in the future?
Oh,
I would argue
that's
all
your
right,
time,
Ali.
Ali. That's your time.
We're gonna have to I mean, Andrea, do you have a couple more things to say to even that, even that out at all?
Otherwise, no one will get off to eat their dinner. And
yeah, we're moving on.
Night, Ali.
Okay, so in order to vote, we're going to go old school. If you're able to go onto gallery view and turn on your webcam, we'd love you to do. If you're not able to do that, just use the chat box to put your name in and obviously who you're going for. And we're going to go for a show of hands. So Peter, I need all of your family to close into the shot, and then everybody else who's having dinner. And yeah, I can see a couple of people turning on. That's brilliant. So
this allows everyone to vote individually.
Exactly. So Jane, you're going to have to count with me because it's going to be a little bit complex. Let's start with the old world. So hands up for old world.
And just keep your hands up for a minute there.
So it looks like Stevens, the Colmers, definitely old worldians. Peter, Francesco's table. Lisa's looking like she's old world. Maybe not Anthony. Oh, this is going to be very tight, I think.
Anthony will do whatever against whatever I say. Anthony will be there.
Okay, Jane, have you taken a mental snapshot of that?
Yep.
Okay, so New World.
All right.
Danny, you can't vote twice. Come on.
Really close.
It is extremely close. I'm not sure if I can pick this, Jane. So, head of events, I'm going to have to give the responsibility to you.
It is very close. Are we allowed to vote or no? All right. Sure. I actually clocked that as old world had a couple of extra votes there. So that was.
I would say that Mike Pence was allowed to vote.
I think.
Well,
it looked like a draw. It looked like a very close run thing to me.
There was literally like 2 votes in it. I mean, I don't know if that's enough for a recount. Let's say it's not. Honestly, though, you both did a really great job, and I definitely couldn't have guessed who was going to win. So, congratulations, Ali.
Well done, Ali.
Well, I'll take that as I think it was very marginal. But again, going back to what I said, I think this is all really good fun doing these things and just looking at the differences and similarities in these styles. And the reality is, I think Andrea said it perfectly when she was saying about Louis Moreau, how everyone can learn from each other. The old is learning from the new is learning from the old. And going forward, that's the way it should be. There's beautiful wines from all over the world, and I think we'll all agree with that one.
Well, we're not.
Luke, sorry. Can I just say something?
Yes, please.
I heard something that was absolutely shocking today. That 50 years from now, I'm going to be drinking Salon champagne made in England.
You will. You will. You heard it here first, Peter. You heard it here first.
Bold statement from Ali.
He doesn't have to worry about 50 years from now.
No, that's a bit mean.
I'm not sure if Brexit will allow that kind of trading, Ali. Maybe that's a different kettle of fish that we literally don't have time to get into. So as you can see on the screen, wine competition number 2 is ready and waiting. So well done to everybody who got 2 correct answers there. Probably one of the biggest wheel of wines we've seen. So that's awesome to see. I'm going to give it a spin and good luck.
Yes, Danny, I've seen your name on there before you're questioning whether your name's on the wheel. I can see it lurking. Didn't you win last time, Danny?
Yes, Danny, I got your entry. Oh, David.
David, well done. Is David in the gallery view? Can we see him? Can you unmute and give us a cheers?
I know you'll be. There we go. Okay, I can see them clapping. I think he's trying to unmute. We do need a toast from you, David. There we go.
There we go. Yeah. Well, thanks. I was almost neutral there because they were both such great wines, reds and the whites. And I've won twice now. Is that cheating?
Don't say that in front of Danny. Gosh.
That is such a, and on the British champagne, I'm glad I'll be dead in 50 years.
Ali's ruffles and feathers.
We're going to have a really good cricket team by then. It will be you'll be drinking English fizz, watching England win the Ashes. It will be wonderful.
Once again, I'm glad I'll be dead.
Fantastic. So we should say, if you've really enjoyed any of the wines tonight, you can revisit them. We've got an event price on going at the moment. So that's the Chablis, the Lewin Estate, the Leneuf, and the Rusden. All of those are available. If you feel like texting, just text with your name, your wine, and the quantity there. Alternatively, get in contact with your broker, and they can definitely sort those out for you. If you've loved this and you want to come to more, we'd love to see you. Of course, as I mentioned at the start of the tasting, we've got Tarquin's gin from the UK, from Cornwall, where I herald from. On the 25th, we've got a very special tasting, again, harking back to the old world, with some white Burgundy from Domaine Chavichouet. And then finally, if you're a spirits drinker, one not to be missed, on the 8th of April, we've got Whiskies of the World. So please get in contact and we can sort that pack out for you. And then finally, we'd love to see you face to face. We've got a couple of Tuesday tutorials upcoming on the 2nd of March and the 6th of April. And then finally, we've got our Grand Cru Pinot, where basically your chance to taste the best Pinots in the world on the 11th of March. So that's all of that. Sounds like we've got a couple people unmuted. I'm going to leave it at there. If anybody has any questions, we'd love to hear them. I know Jane and I are going to stay on the call and finish off our drinks. So if you guys want to unmute and stick around, we'd love to have a conversation. But from all of us, I'd just like to say thank you so much to our two MWs. I found it super interesting and very enlightening. So thanks, guys, and thanks everybody for coming. Any last statements from Andrea or Alistair?
No, just thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed debating Ali, and I'm delighted that he's won. I think he was on shaky ground for a while, but he's clearly clawed back. So that's well done to you.
Well, no, likewise, it's been great. It's fun to say. Wine should be fun, and that's what it's all about. You know, there's no right, there's no wrong with wine. It should just be about enjoying it and enjoying it with people and having healthy debates and discussions. It's been great fun and great to go toe to toe, Andrea, together. And I look forward to the next time where we can enjoy some wines together. So no, been great start to the day again for me, as always.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Ellie.
Bye.
Thank you, Andrea.